Gooshbagz? Welcome in to the Week 13 edition of the 2021 Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League podcast. As always, I am your host with the most, the commissioner of the Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League, Jason Peck. What a great week it was. Man, I tell you, it was a fantastic week, and I will tell you all about it as we go throughout the show. But this week, I am here, unfortunately, all by my lonesome. I had to get this one in quick. I got some stuff going on Wednesday, so I had to quick get home and start recording this bad boy so I can get it done and in and off to you guys by tomorrow, by Wednesday. So you guys will get it the day early, so good work. Congratulations. Not good work. Good work to me. Congratulations to all of you. Now, unfortunately, we had some pretty big injuries this week. I mean, they weren't massively, massive what's the word I'm looking for? Implications. There aren't massive implications for fantasy football necessarily. However, there are some pretty big injuries. So, let's jump into it. Unfortunately, Kenyon Drake, the old boy out of Las Vegas now, broke his ankle this weekend. Unfortunately, he's done for the year. We had another injury that looked massive during the day. Logan Thomas, he has some sort of knee injury, but the tests on Monday did say that it was not his ACL. So I don't know what's actually going to happen to him, but it looked bad. Now, this is another big injury. Adam Thielen, we're gonna miss you for 2 or 3 weeks or so because he has a high ankle sprain and he's out for approximately 2 to 3 weeks. The last big injury was Miles Sanders' ankle injury, but they have a bye, so hopefully he comes back next week and is okay. Now for this last injury, I'm gonna have to get rid of this sad music. I don't want to, never mind. I'm not going to get rid of the sad music, but I'm just not going to, Corey Davis re-injured his groin, and you know what this means? Elijah Moore, hype train. Elijah Moore is going to lead me to a fantasy victory along with all the rest of the fantastic parts on my team. Now that I have locked in a spot in the playoffs this week, woo! Locked in my spot. Now it's a matter of what seed I get. I could be anywhere between 2 and 6 by the end of this week. So there are massive implications for the games this week. There's only one spot up for bye, and we will get into it more later. But there's only one spot up to bye. All the rest of the fantasy playoff seeds are up for grabs, except for first. I believe Adam is locked in first. Maybe. Potentially. I don't know. Well, no. I need the 8 and 4 teams. I'd have to see what all the tiebreakers are. I'd say all of them, 1 to 6, could be changed by next week. Let's just go with that. Now, on to our top scorer of the week. It was Rock the Hawk back on top for, I think, maybe the 3rd time this year with 127.72 fantasy points. So eventually, as you reminded me, so maybe it'll be later rather than sooner, you'll get your Alexander Hamilton. So, since you only scored 127.72 fantasy points, I'm not sure exactly what your chances are against the waivers this week. Actually, I am sure, but I'm not going to tell you guys yet because that's not a very high total, despite it being a pretty high total of fantasy points in general this week. For the collective, it was all kind of evenly spread out. There wasn't one team that just went nuts. Just won it. He won it with 127.72 fantasy points. Now we're going to move on to the matchups of this week. Let us take a look first at my victory. The more, the merrier. I love this team name. Versus Ferris Bueller, your, Y-O-U-R, my hero. Like I said, I think you should get a new hero because your team stunk this week. But we'll start with my team. This week we had some massive games by 3 major people, and then everybody else was kind of in the duds category. We had Tom Brady with 28.62 fantasy points, putting up a big week. I think he was number 2 or 3 on the week at the quarterback position. We have Jonathan Taylor, I think was also number 2 or 3 for the week. He had 24.3 fantasy points. And then George Kittle, he was guaranteed tight end 1 this week, put up 35.1 fantasy points. And he just kept me alive throughout these terrible games from the rest of my team. In the duds category, we have James Robinson, who got benched after a fumble. The coaches were saying that he was, injured going into this, so they were taking it easy on him. But then, for some reason, he was getting touches at the end of the game. So, I don't know. He only got 2 fantasy points. We have Mark Ingram, who dudded for me on Thursday night with 3.1 fantasy points. And then Tyler Bass, you can't really fault him. He only had 3, but it was a super windy game, as you guys saw by that video that I shared. So, the rest of my team, I need to figure out that wide receiver position. I did leave Elijah Moore on the bench for some reason. Actually, I know the reason. I wanted to see if he could do it with Zach Wilson first, and apparently he can. So Elijah Moore is going to be locked in my lineup, hopefully the rest of the season, along with a hodgepodge of the rest of the teams here. So we'll see. Also, DJ Moore could potentially come back. Maybe the Carolina Panthers did fire their offensive coordinator this week. Maybe they'll get him more involved as these final few weeks plow along. On Ferris Bueller, You're My Hero, we did have one player who put up a massive game. Chris Godwin had 22.7 fantasy points, so that was a decent game. Tyler Lockett was close to that booming studs category at 16.3. In the duds category, you did have Kenyon Drake. Like I said, he broke his ankle, I should say. So you can't really blame him for that dud. And Marvin Jones only had 2.1 fantasy points. Not a great game from him either. Patrick Mahomes had a dud this week, 12.56 fantasy points. And everybody else was just kind of meh. Nothing too great, nothing too bad. Either way, no matter who he had played, he wouldn't have caught up to me. Anyways, so a dominating victory for the more the merrier, locking in their playoff spot for this week. And from now on, it's just all luck, baby. All luck of the draw. So I'm excited. I'm feeling lucky this year. I'm going to take it all the way. Now for matchup number 2, we did have Hot Digsity Dog versus Deshaun's Happy Endings. They are close to the 2 best friends that anybody could have, Chad and Adam, and it was a tight one. Let me tell you, we did have, going into, I don't know what the score exactly was going into the final game, but they had, Adam had Stephon Diggs versus Devin Singletary and the Patriots defense. So it ended up being a pretty tight game, but Hot Digsity Dog did pull it out, 109.62 points to 105.9 for Deshaun's Happy Endings. And the studs for Hot Digsity Dog, we did have a couple of people. He just had consistently good games from most of his team, but Keenan Allen had 19.9 fantasy points. He was put on the COVID list yesterday, Monday. There's a possibility he gets off it before the week expires, so he could play next week, depending on I don't know if he's vaccinated or not, but if he gets 2 negative COVID tests and is vaccinated, then he can get off of the COVID list in time to play this weekend. I would say in the duds category for his team, he did have Dak Prescott, who only put up 11.22 fantasy points. Everybody else was just kind of there, like good games. In the high single digits, low double digits, just like a solid, consistent week for Hot Digsity Dog. On the other side of the matchup, he did have Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp. That stack, once again, keeping him in contention. Matthew Stafford had 24 fantasy points. Cooper Kupp had 22.9 fantasy points. And those were the studs for his team. In the duds category, we had Devin Singletary only putting up 3.6 fantasy points. You'd think he'd get more work, seeing as there were no passes thrown at all in that game on Monday night with the insane wind and snow blowing. Even Mac Jones only threw the ball 3 times last week, or last night. So, yeah, you'd think that Devin Singletary would have gotten more work. Unfortunately for Chad, he did not. In the duds category as well, we did have Devonta Smith, who only put up 2.5 fantasy points. So, everybody else was kind of average or a little above average. I tell you what, though, Kyle Pitts has kind of been a disappointment this year. Besides, and I think I mentioned this previously on a previous podcast, but besides those two, I think it was with Benaiah, yeah. Besides those 2 weeks where he scored 22 and 19 fantasy points, he did not score above 10 any other time. So he's kind of been a disappointment. You think he'd be locked in your lineup there, but unfortunately for you, he's not, and that's why that's one reason why you're fighting for a playoff spot here in the last week of the season. All right, for matchup number 3, we got Rock the Hawk, the highest scorer player in the league this week. Beat down my tight end Ertz Van Eifert, 127.72 fantasy points to my tight end Ertz, 90.58 fantasy points. Now, the studs on Rock the Hawk, we did have Lamar Jackson. No, he wasn't a stud this week. He only had 17 fantasy points. I lied to you guys. We have Rob Gronkowski leading off the studs this week with 19.8 fantasy points. We have David Montgomery also having a studly week with 24.1 fantasy points. And then Leonard Fournette has been very consistent over the past few weeks here with 18.7 fantasy points. And he didn't really have any duds on this matchup. We did have Myles Gaskin who put up 5.9 fantasy points, but everybody else was low teens, or low tens, I should say, like 10, 11, 13s, a couple of 13s there. And the Bills D had 5. So nothing too bad on Rock the Hawk. He has to be pretty pleased with the solid performance from his team this week. On my tight end Ertz Van Eifert, he is lucky that he put in Javonte Williams this week. Javonte Williams had 26.8 fantasy points this week. He had Justin Herbert at 25.28 fantasy points this week. And Matt Gay had 15 fantasy points this week. And everybody else was basically a dud on his team. Naeem Hines and DK Metcalf were so-so. Tyreek Hill only had 3.2 fantasy points. Travis Kelce only had 4.2 fantasy points. Their team just didn't have that much offense going this week. And I believe... How did this game go? It was Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 54 rushing yards. Where did the touchdowns get scored? Was there an offensive... let's see. Recap, Gamecast. Let's take a look at that. Where did the scores happen? Scoring plays. Let's see here. We have a 56-yard field goal by Harrison Butker. Oh, Patrick Mahomes did have a rushing touchdown. We had an interception return for a touchdown, pick 6, and then a bunch of field goals. So, yeah, not too high scoring by the Kansas City Chiefs and their supposedly high-powered offense. In the duds category, we had, like I said, Tyreek Hill, Adam Thielen. He broke his leg. Not much you can do about that. And then, for some reason, he didn't start a defense. I would give him an automatic loss, but he already lost. So I can't really punish him too much for this. And he played against the highest scorer of the league this week. I don't think any defense he would have put in would have gotten him the victory. So can't be too frustrated with that. Although I wish you would set your lineup, Buck, even though you never watch this podcast. So it's just fallen upon no ears, I guess. For matchup number 4, we did have 2 in a row. Yes! Versus Waddle, baby, Waddle, baby, Waddle, baby, Waddle. All right, this was a great matchup, and a surprisingly great matchup. We thought that Waddle Baby maybe had this matchup locked away in the bag, and he said so himself that we jinxed him on our podcast last week, saying there's no way that Team IR, formerly known as Team IR, could take down Waddle Baby this week. But of course, it did. Brandon's team put up 122.04 fantasy points to Waddle Baby's 115.42. In the studs category for 2 in a row, yes, we have Justin Jefferson, who put up 30.1 fantasy points. We have Josh Jacobs, who had himself a good game of 19.5 fantasy points, and he should be solid going forward since Kenyon Drake did get hurt and is out for the year. Damian Harris also had a pretty good game at 17.1 fantasy points. In the duds category, we did have Cole Beasley, who put up 1.6 fantasy points, but that's really about it. Cole Beasley should not have been started this matchup anyways. Should have played any of his other players. Jamal Williams, I definitely would have started over Cole Beasley. Odell Beckham, Tyler Conklin, I probably would have flexed over Cole Beasley because of the terrible weather that was on the line for that game. But you got the win anyway with that terrible decision in your flex spot. So congratulations. On the other side of the ball, we have Waddle Baby studs. Or I guess studs, multiple. We have Kyler Murray, I think was the quarterback one on the week with 30.82 fantasy points. We have Antonio Gibson, who put up 19.6 fantasy points. And everybody else was kind of not solid, but not bad. Noah Fant only had 5.3. He was your lowest scorer on the week. Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon kind of were dud-ish. With 9.4 and 7.7 fantasy points. So, looking forward here, I mean, you've got the Tennessee backfield lockdown. You've got Kareem Hunt coming back here off the bye. He should be playing. You got a pretty good shot here going forward, especially against me next week. But we'll see how that goes, and we'll get into that matchup later in the week. On to the last matchup of Week 13. We have Ain't No Walla Back Girl taking down Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba. 95.46 fantasy points to 88.2. Now, we got in the studs category for Week 13, we have James Conner, who put up 18.1 fantasy points. It's about time we stopped doubting James Conner. And Alexander Madison put up 19.9 fantasy points. Those were two big games, and that led you to this victory over Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba. In the duds category, you do have Terry McLaurin only putting up 3.7 fantasy points to the Las Vegas Raiders, and Amari Cooper putting up 5.1 fantasy points, and also Foster Moreau with only 3.9 fantasy points this week. You'd think him filling in for Darren Waller would have been a better matchup, but it was just a defensive game here, that Las Vegas-Washington matchup. Otherwise, everybody else played all right. Actually, I'd say Derek Carr is close to a dud this week with 12.36 fantasy points. You're obviously looking for more points from your quarterback. On Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba, we did have one player who was a stud this week, Sony Michel, filling in for Darrell Henderson there with 20.4 fantasy points. And the Colts defense, I'll say, is up there too with 16 fantasy points. They dominated the Houston Texans, so good work on that front. However, it didn't quite get you the victory because you did have, in the duds category, you had Josh Allen, and Josh Allen only put up 11.7 fantasy points. But your boy Boston Scott, wait a minute. That's a goose. He had 0 fantasy points this week. So I don't know why you started him with Miles Sanders back in the lineup here, but I guess you were desperate at running back this week. With Chuba Hubbard on bye, Nick Chubb on bye, Darrell Henderson banged up. He didn't want to start him, and he didn't want to drop any of these players either for replacement running back. So yeah, I guess Boston Scott was kind of your next man up. I would also call Darnell Mooney kind of a dud with 5.2 fantasy points, although he was playing against a good Arizona defense, so you can't fault him too much for that. All right, that's about it. I mean, everybody else was kind of meh. Dalton Schultz, 6.8. Chase Claypool, 6.4. Not so great for Chase. But you live and you learn, and you are already in the playoffs, so that's no skin off your nose, no skin off your back. No sweat off my back, no skin off your nose. I don't know. I'm mixing up phrases here, and I don't know what I'm saying. But we will move on to my favorite segment of the week. The waiver wire team that would kick all of our asses. We have, at the quarterback spot for this waiver wire team, Zach Wilson, putting up 21.04 fantasy points. If that's not a surprise, I don't know what is, except maybe the running back position. We have Kenneth Gainwell putting up 17.2 fantasy points. That's where all your Boston Scott points went to, was Kenneth Gainwell. He was our running back 1 for the waiver wire team. The running back 2 for the waiver wire team is Travis Homer. He got most of his points on like a 73-yard fake punt touchdown run, which was dope as hell. He had 17 fantasy points this week. At the wide receiver position, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown with the game winner. Congratulations! The Lions got their first win. Congrats! On the back of that, Amon-Ra St. Brown got 19.8 fantasy points this week, and he secured the victory for the Lions this week and is the wide receiver 1 on our waiver wire team. At the wide receiver 2 spot, we do have Deontay Harris, who put up 17.9 fantasy points this week, right before being suspended for a DUI. So, yeah. At the tight end spot is somebody I have never heard of before, Brock Wright, and he only scored 9.8 fantasy points, so not a good day out of the tight end spot for the waiver wire. Brock Wright, by the way, is a Lions player, so we have 2 Detroit Lions on the waiver wire team this week. In the flex spot, we did have Jalen Guyton putting up 16.9 fantasy points, so good work, Jalen. He's kind of a boomer bust player out of LA Chargers. So good work, Jalen. In the defensive position, we do have the Cowboys defense who put up 14 fantasy points. And don't forget the kicker. Never forget the kicker. We have Jake Elliott putting up 17 fantasy points. Good friend of a lot of the tennis players here in the Rockford area. This team would have put up 150.64 fantasy points. Wasn't even close to 127 put up by Rock the Hawk. The waivers are 11-2 for this year. We've got some work to do in order to beat the waivers, boys. So let's get on that. Now we will go to the standings for each division. In the East Division, like I said, we have 5 of the 6. That was not 6. 5 of the 6 playoff spots locked in. Now the seeds, like I said, can be rearranged in any sort of way, but the 5 of the 6 spots are locked in. We do have one matchup this week, and it happens to be the 2 teams in contention for this playoff spot, and they are going for this last 6th position in the playoffs. So we have Hot Diggity Dog at 9-4, leading the entire league at 9-4 with 100% chance locked in. He is not locked in at the 1 seed. I'm not sure. We have 3 8-5 teams, so I'm not sure if Hot Diggity Dog loses and one of these other 8-5 teams wins. It'll depend on the head-to-head matchup. I didn't go through and see what the head-to-head matchups were for all of these teams. I apologize. If you are curious, then you can ask me, or you can look yourself and see. If you go on the scoreboard tab, you should be able to see all the previous weeks, and you can figure out the head-to-head matchups to see if you can get in that tiebreaker mode there. But also the last tiebreaker, the second tiebreaker after head-to-head matchups, so say you guys played each other twice and each one won once, then points 4 is the next highest the next tiebreaker to get the higher seed. So go in and check yourself if you don't know. But yeah, so he's not locked in at that one spot. Any of the 8 and 5 teams can win this week and can potentially take that 1 seed. In second place in the East, we have Waddle Waddle sitting at 8 and 5. He is locked in the playoffs. In third place in the East, we have Owen Tree, woo, now known as the More the Merrier. I put in the wrong name here. Actually, I just didn't update it, so now I probably jinxed myself and knock myself out of the playoffs right away because I named myself the wrong team. The More the Merrier, sitting at 7 and 6 there, and we are locked in as well. And I could, so same thing goes like the other way. So, say all 3 of the 8 and 5 teams, because I don't think any of the 8 and 5 teams are actually playing each other this week. So any of the 8 and 5 teams could potentially lose, and then the tiebreaker would have to be checked out between those 3 teams, or those teams and my team, and see what the head-to-head matchups are. And if they are tied, then it's points 4, which currently I think I'm leading after Adam. So I think Adam is almost guaranteed to be locked in unless one of you guys has the head-to-head tiebreaker against him. He's almost locked in at the 1 spot, but there is a small chance that he is not. In the 4th spot in the East, we have Ferris Bueller, You're My Hero, at 6 and 7. He has a 49% chance to make the playoffs. This is one of the 2 teams that is playing for that 6th playoff spot. And in last place in the East, my tight end Ertz, when Eifert, oh, how the mighty have fallen. You won last year, Aaron, and now this is proving that was a fluke, because if you don't check your lineup every week, you're going to lose more often than you win. And you went 5 and 8 this year, and you are out. In the West Division, at the top of the West Division, we have Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba sitting at 8 and 5 with a locked-in spot in the playoffs. We have Rock the Hawk at 8 and 5, who is also locked in his spot in the playoffs. And the 3rd spot here is up for grabs. We have Deshaun's Happy Endings is on the other end of that matchup this week. So we will see the winner of that game gets the 6th spot in the division, or in the playoffs, and that's going to be an exciting one to watch. But like I said, the rest of us, we all have something to play for this week. There's nobody besides, we're always playing for $10, so anybody can win the $10, but unfortunately, ain't no Waller Batgirl, Team IR, sitting at 5 and 8 and 2 and 11. You are out of the playoffs, so I apologize, but them's the rules. Neil, sometime this year, one of these years, we'll get you into the playoffs, but it's not this year. I'm sorry. All right, on to the matchup predictions for next week. We've got last week I was 4 for 5, so pretty good. Always shooting for perfection though, so this week I'll try to go 5 and 5. Andrew Kortz was 2 for 5 this week, so I destroyed him, and I am not sorry about it. So them's the beans. So you guys, I think we've only done this like 6 times this year, where we've each, I've missed a couple of weeks, and then guests have missed a couple of weeks. So you guys are 1, 3, and 2 against me. So you got a losing record for sure. I'm 3, 1, and 2 against y'all. So that's right. I beat your butts. All right. So we are going to, move on to these matchups. The first matchup is, of course, my matchup, the More the Merrier versus Waddle Baby Waddle. And let me tell you, this is going to be a tough one for me because I've got Jonathan Taylor on a bye, and that makes me sad, and he is a crux of my team. That may degrade my chances a little bit, but as always, I must pick my own team, and I'm going to pick me to win, of course. I don't even know why I erased my team name here, but I am going with me. Let's see. I've got Tom Brady versus Buffalo. I've got James Robinson versus Tennessee. That'll be a good matchup. Right now, I've got Mark Ingram against the Jets in my lineup. That probably won't be the case coming into this weekend. We're going to find a replacement for him. We've got DJ Moore versus Atlanta in a smash matchup where the offense is going to be better than they were because they fired their terrible offensive coordinator. Elijah Moore versus a surprisingly bad New Orleans defense. Elijah Moore is going to smash. George Kittle against Cincinnati. George Kittle has been smashing. Van Jefferson versus Arizona. And you might be surprised as to why I've got Van Jefferson in my lineup, but this is a surprisingly cool fact. Arizona Cardinals defense has been pretty good against the passing game, but they've been really good against wide receiver ones, and like the wide receivers 2 and 3 against Arizona, like destroy Arizona. So I actually am excited to play Van Jefferson because I think they're going to shut down or try to shut down Cooper Kupp, and Van Jefferson and OBJ might have a decent game. Right now I have the Eagles D. Obviously, I'm going to replace the Eagles D because they are on bye. And Tyler Bass against Tampa Bay, I'm sure he is going to bounce back and have himself a day. On the other side, we've got Kyler Murray versus the Rams, Joe Mixon versus San Francisco, Cordell Patterson versus Carolina. That's a tough defense. Devontae Adams versus Chicago. He's going to smash. Jamar Chase versus San Francisco. That's going to be tough. Noah Fant versus Detroit. That should be a good matchup. Antonio Gibson versus Dallas. The Chargers versus the Giants defense. And Chris Boswell versus Minnesota. Yeah, it's going to be tough, but I got to stick with my team. I've been right more often than I've not been right with my team. So, yeah, I got to stick with them. Odds are in my favor. All right, matchup number 2 is Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba versus 2 in a row. Yes! All right, on Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba, we have Josh Allen versus Tampa Bay. We got Chuba Hubbard versus Atlanta. That should be good. Nick Chubb versus Baltimore. Chase Claypool versus Minnesota. We got Hunter Renfrow versus Kansas City. We got Dalton Schultz versus Washington. Darrell Henderson back in the lineup versus Arizona. He's got to figure out his defensive position, but he's got Justin Tucker versus Cleveland. On the other side, we've got team formerly known as Team IR, 2 in a row. Yes! We've got Russell Wilson versus Houston. That should be a good matchup. Josh Jacobs versus Kansas City. He's going to replace Damian Harris with probably Jamal Williams. Which should be a good matchup. Jamal Williams, well, not a great matchup, but Jamal Williams versus Denver. Justin Jefferson versus Pittsburgh. That'll be smash. Michael Pittman, he'll have to replace. He's going to have a tough time replacing these guys. Maybe OBJ instead of Michael Pittman, but he's going to have a tough time replacing, having the depth to kind of take down Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba. So I am going to pick Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba. All right, on to matchup number 3. We've got Rock the Hawk versus Ain't No Wall Back Girl. Now, Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba. No, what am I saying? Rock the Hawk has Lamar Jackson versus Cleveland. He's got Myles Gaskin on a bye, so he's going to have to replace Myles Gaskin with probably David Montgomery and then figure out the flex spot with all of his wide receivers that he has. He's got Leonard Fournette versus Buffalo. He's got DeAndre Hopkins versus the Rams. Mike Evans versus Buffalo. Gronk versus Buffalo. Then he's got either Deontay Johnson versus Minnesota, T. Higgins versus San Francisco, or he could play Melvin Gordon versus Detroit, or Mike Williams versus the Giants. He really has a tough choice because all those players seem good. So, good luck with your choice this week. I don't envy you, or maybe I do envy you, but I think Rock the Hawk has got this game on lock. Boom! That was a good one. All right, but we'll go over to Neil just to check out his team. Ain't no wall to back, girl. He's got Derek Carr versus Kansas City. But he's got Aaron Rodgers coming back from his bye versus Chicago, so Aaron Rodgers will be in. He's got James Conner, who's been looking good versus the Rams. He's got Alexander Mattison versus Pittsburgh. That'll be good as well. Well, I don't know. Actually, the run defense for Pittsburgh is okay. We got Terry McLaurin versus Dallas. We got Amari Cooper versus Washington. Foster Moreau versus Kansas City. We got Tony Pollard versus Washington. Let's see, is Dalvin Cook going to come back this week? What are they saying? He was a limited participant in Tuesday's practice, so that is a good sign. Maybe you'll be able to throw in Dalvin Cook in your flex here. That would be interesting. They got a Thursday game, though, so we'll see if he comes back. So don't put him in your flex. Put him in one of your running back spots. Oh, wait, no, he'd just be replacing Alexander Mattison, so that wouldn't be an extra flex. They're saying Deebo Samuel might come back this week, but overall, I'm going to have to go with Rock the Hawk in this matchup. On to matchup number 4, we have Deshaun's Happy Endings versus Ferris Bueller, You're My Hero, the biggest matchup of this week. This matchup has massive playoff implications, and right now, it is projected to be down to the wire. Ferris Bueller, You're My Hero is projected to get 87.5 fantasy points, and Deshaun's Happy Endings is projected to get 86.6 fantasy points. However, 2 of his players are on a bye this week. So, let's check out Ferris Bueller, You're My Hero. We do have Patrick Mahomes versus the Vegas Raiders. We have Najee Harris versus Minnesota. That'll be a good matchup for him. I think he's going to do well there. We have Kenyon Drake is out, so we're going to have to replace him with Aaron Jones. He should be okay with that replacement. Aaron Jones versus Chicago should be good for Aaron. Assuming he's back. Oh, yeah, he is back. He came back before the bye. We have Tyler Lockett versus Houston. We have Marvin Jones versus Tennessee. We got Tyler Higbee versus Arizona. Man, I'm not feeling good about your lineup here, James. And then we got Chris Godwin versus Buffalo. We've got the Vikings D versus Pittsburgh. That might be a good matchup, actually. Younghoe Koo, as always, versus Carolina. Yeah, even with Aaron Jones thrown in, I don't really feel good about your team this week. Let's take a look at the other side. We got Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp versus Arizona, that classic stack. We've got Saquon Barkley versus the Chargers. We'll have to see how Saquon does this week. He hasn't been super effective as of late. We've got Devin Singletary versus Tampa Bay. I'm just trying to see. Your running backs don't look great. I'd almost maybe play Devonta Freeman over Devin Singletary this week. We've got CeeDee Lamb versus Washington. Like I said, Cooper Kupp versus Arizona. We got Kyle Pitts versus Carolina. You need to fill in a flex, so yeah, I mean, maybe Devonta Freeman goes into the flex instead. I don't know, man. Your depth is not there. We've got the Patriots D. They're on the bye, so we're going to have to replace the defense. And then Daniel Carlson versus the Kansas City. Man, this might be just a low-scoring matchup to get into the playoffs. I'm going to have to go with Deshaun's Happy Endings. He has a couple of more players who I feel confident in over Ferris Bueller, You're My Hero. So we're going to go that direction with that matchup. And we are on the last matchup of next week, Week 14. We have Hot Digsity Dog versus my tight end Ertzwin Eifert. And I have a feeling that this matchup is going to be a blowout. Although he does have Keenan Allen potentially not playing. Elijah Mitchell is potentially not playing this week. Austin Eckler is questionable. Is he okay? He is dealing with bumps and bruises following the game. He should be fine. Yeah, so I mean, you got to potentially throw in your Clyde Edwards-Helaire up there instead of Elijah Mitchell, and then fill in a couple of wide receivers maybe. Oh, you got Zeke. Put Zeke there in the flex probably, and then you'll have to figure out another wide receiver. You do have an empty spot on your bench. Wait. 6, 7? Yeah, you do have an empty spot on your bench. I think one extra empty spot. on your bench. So yeah, you'll get it sorted out. But I think Hot Digsity Dog has this one in the bag. And then on the other side, we've got Justin Herbert versus the Giants. We got Javonte Williams versus Detroit. That should be good. DK Metcalf versus Houston. You got great matchups this week. I would say that my tight end Ertzwin Eifert has potential to win, but I don't think he's going to check his lineup and or play an entire lineup this week. So I think Hot Digsity Dog has got this in the bag. I'll have to shoot you a reminder to set your lineup because this definitely has playoff implications if you win this matchup. So, all right, that will do it, boys. We made it. It was a quick one. I tried to be quick, trying to get it in and out this week. But I'm glad that you guys joined me this week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I know it's not as entertaining as when I have a guest on and we have some banter back and forth, but this is what you get. This is what you get this week. So next week will be entertaining to decipher the playoffs and try to see how the rest of this season is going to go. I am stoked for this weekend. Hopefully, I'm going to have a few of you guys over. Everybody is welcome, or everybody in the league, I should say, is welcome to hang out this weekend. I am looking forward to seeing you guys, and I'm looking forward to fantasy football this weekend. So you guys have a great weekend. I am looking forward to these matchups and the podcast next week. Yeah, where we get to go over all that stuff. So I will see you guys next week. Have a good one. See you guys.